Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about all the DC event omnibus released so far as of January 2021. For this video, we're going to leave out character-specific events like Batman No Man's Land and the death and return of Superman. We're going to be focusing more on the Crisis-oriented omnibus. Before we begin, a little bit of background about Crisis and all the event comics from DC Comics. In 1985, Mark Wolfman and George Perez released Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was a massive event comic book, which its conclusion saw the merging of all the DC universes into one continuity. What I have right next to me is technically not an omnibus, but it is still a really awesome collection that I want to talk about before we get into the omnibus. This is the Crisis on Infinite Earths box set. In this box set, we don't just get the main event, but we actually get all the lead-up comics leading into Crisis on Infinite Earths, and every single tie into Crisis on Infinite Earths as well. These event box sets are awesome. I believe this one's still in print, so if you want to drop $200, $250 to get an awesome box collection, this is one that I would highly recommend, especially if you're a huge DC comic nut like me. So the Crisis box set, if you want me to do an overview of this complete collection, then definitely leave a comment and let me know. I might be able to get to that sometime. There's a lot of videos I want to do and a lot of things I want to talk about, but I could talk about Crisis all day. Maybe I'll make like a 20-part series. Just kidding, that would get old really fast. So moving on from Crisis on Infinite Earths, we're going to get into all the event omnibus right now. The first omnibus I have on this list is 0 Hour. 0 Hour was a follow-up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Crisis on Infinite Earths brought all the timelines together. This event was made to merge all the timelines into one cohesive timeline. How many times am I going to say timeline in this video? In these overviews, I'm only going to do a couple of key points. If you guys want to see more about one specific omnibus, again, let me know. But in this omnibus, we see Parallax Hal Jordan, we get some Wave Rider, we get a better understanding of how the Justice Society of America fits into the timeline, and we get to see the current incarnation of the characters crossover with their Golden Age and Silver Age counterparts. So this does collect the entire miniseries, plus all the tie-ins. If you're a fan of Infinite Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths, this is a good bridging point between those storylines. Because of the popularity of Infinite Crisis, this book is kind of always forgotten as the actual first sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. So cool book, it retails for $150, and I believe it's still currently in print, so you could probably find it for under $150, maybe closer to $100. The next on our list is Grant Morrison's 1 Million. 1 Million was an event comic that saw the Justice League and all their other counterparts from the DC Comics cross over with their counterparts from a million years into the future. The core series is written by Grant Morrison, but there are dozens of tie-ins by other writers and artists. If you're a fan of All-Star Superman, you might notice that Solaris is one of the main villains. He's the Star Eater. And the events of this tie in really closely with the JLA Omnibus by Grant Morrison. If you're a fan of time travel sci-fi, this is definitely a cool thing to check out. It also is pretty much a standalone event comic where you don't have to have too much history on other things such as 0 Hour or Crisis on Infinite Earths. And almost every issue is written to be like a one-shot. Now this omnibus retails for only $99.99, which is a crazy good deal because comparably the size is close to this omnibus that's $150. So if you're a fan of Grant Morrison, time travel, or just DC Comics in general, this is a great pickup, and it's also usually found at a pretty good price. The next Omni on our list is Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis is what put Geoff Johns on the map as one of the premier DC comic book writers. At the time, he was writing Superman, Green Lantern, and Teen Titans, and his JSA book was just transitioning to Justice Society of America. This is Geoff Johns at his peak. Infinite Crisis sees characters and storylines picked up from Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's a lot of lead up to the main series, but what's awesome about that is all the lead ups are also included in this omnibus. This is a heavy read, and if you don't know that much about DC Comics, it might get a little confusing. But on a positive note, if you don't know anything about DC Comics, you're going to leave reading this omnibus knowing way too much about DC comic books. So as I was saying, there's not just the Infinite Crisis crossover in this omnibus, but there's also the OMAC Project, Superman Sacrifice, Villains United, Day of Vengeance, the Rann-Thanagar War, and JSA Crisis of Conscience. This is an awesome book. It brings back the multiverse, and it also really delves into the dynamic and the friendship between the major three, Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman. It changes the course of DC Comics for years to come. And again, if you're into all the alternate Earth stuff and you love all these event comics or you're just a fan of Crisis, this is the #1 omnibus in my opinion to have if you're a big fan of that stuff. So this is another one of those expensive books. It retails for $150. This is the second print, so I would imagine, like the first print, when it goes out of print, it's going to be very expensive. Up until the release of this one, there was copies on eBay going for upwards of 200 to 300 bucks. So Infinite Crisis is one of the most well-known crossover events in DC Comics history, in a massive omnibus with an awesome collection. So spinning right out of Infinite Crisis was an event called 52. 52 was written by Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, Greg Rucka, Mark Waid, and Keith Giffen. And of Superman fame, Dan Jurgens does do a lot of the art. This story was a surprise smash hit. For a book following Batwoman, Booster Gold, and a bunch of other C and D list characters, comic book readers were drawn to this for its awesome creative teams and its many plot threads that paid off in a major way. I would almost say this is required reading for right after Infinite Crisis, especially since it does bridge the gap between event comics. There are a couple of unfortunate things I want to bring up about this omnibus. First, it's been out of print for years and there are currently no plans for a reprint, at least that I know of. So this $150 omnibus could reach closer to 200, 250 bucks because of higher demand. The other thing to note is the quality of this book. Many reviewers noted that the spine was completely glued down, so that ribbon was just stuck there, which causes a lot of gutter loss. And if it sits for too long, a lot of the pages could tear out pretty easily. Before buying this, I knew that that was an issue, but I felt compelled anyways because it's still a series that I wanted. And unfortunately, I did have to do some major repairs on this book to make it even readable. So buyer beware on this one, but if you're willing to fix it up a little bit and give it some TLC, it'll be a good addition to your collection. So next on our list is Final Crisis. Final Crisis was spearheaded by Grant Morrison, who did work on 52. 52 kind of worked as a bridge from Infinite Crisis to Final Crisis. There was another series called Countdown, but a lot of people disregard that series because it was poorly executed and just not that good, to be honest. Infinite Crisis is known for being a little divisive itself. Some fans think it's Grant Morrison's best work. Others feel it was a little bit too rushed. As a Jack Kirby fan and a fan of the New Gods, I do enjoy this book very much. I think Grant Morrison really understands the characters he deals with, and it feels like a true follow-up to the Fourth World titles. So this is another massive omnibus. Included with it is some tie-in issues that Grant Morrison did for Batman. Something also to note is Grant Morrison did the main series, but Jeff Johns does a lot of the tie-ins. So we follow up on a lot of stuff from Infinite Crisis. This book is still in print and retails for around 150 bucks, and generally you could get it for about 100 bucks online. Next up on our list is yet another Jeff Johns book. This is Blackest Night. Blackest Night was a comic book that ties pretty closely to Green Lantern, but because it incorporates the entire DC universe into it, I decided this one would be a good one to present in this video. So Final Crisis follows the Black Lanterns, who are the antithesis of the Green Lanterns, and basically all the other Lanterns in the universe at this point. And the way the story wraps up is we see a lot of characters from the DC comic universe who have previously died or disappeared come back into the main fold. There's a lot of Jeff Johns writing this because he wrote the Green Lantern series and the main series, but there's still a lot of other tie-ins. I consider this book to be a Crisis book as well, because this honestly feels like a follow-up to Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis. I do want to note the art in this because even though it is a darker book, the pages just pop with color and it's gorgeous. I should note that this is the 10th anniversary edition, and since we're still kind of in that time frame of 10 years since this came out, it's still available. Like a lot of the other event comic books, it retails for 150 bucks. But again, as long as it's still in print, you can find it pretty cheap online somewhere. I'm almost certain of it. The last event omnibus we're going to go over today is Brightest Day, which is a direct follow-up from Blackest Night. So as I was saying, there's a lot of characters who appear at the end of Blackest Night. What this does is it incorporates a storyline with all those returned characters. The story is written by Jeff Johns and Peter J. Tomasi. And kind of like 52, it takes some of the lesser known characters and really fleshes them out. This is one of the last event comic books before the new 52 reboot. When this was released, it was only 75 bucks, but because of high demand and being out of print, you can't find a copy for less than around 150 bucks. Which is unfortunate, but if you're able to get your hands on a copy, it's definitely worth it, especially just to round out the plot lines from Blackest Night. Now, before we wrap this up, I do want to talk about one more event that's going to be coming out in omnibus form in April. What I have here is Flashpoint. This isn't an omnibus, but actually a slipcase collection. Flashpoint was the last DC comic event before the new 52 reboot, and this is a direct lead into that reboot. Also written by Jeff Johns, who did most of this. We see Barry Allen fall into a reality where Bruce Wayne was killed as a kid and Atlantis and Themyscira are at war, and it really highlights the Flash being one of the most powerful DC comic book heroes. This collection is out of print in this format. I don't know how much they run for, but I am planning on upgrading to the omnibus in April when that comes out. So if you want to see me do a follow-up video with that Omnibus, let me know in the comment section. I know I'm asking that a lot, but you know, I want to talk about this stuff. I love talking about Omnis. So there you have it, people. All the Omnis pertaining to DC comic events as of right now. I want to thank you guys again for watching. And if you like what you saw, please make sure you like the video, comment, and share this with other Omnibus enthusiasts just like us. So I want to thank you guys again. Time to jump off the Omnibus.